Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top stories tonight. A man was shot and killed this morning outside of President Trump's Florida home. Both Secret Service and local law enforcement found him inside the front gate of the property. One of the world's most wanted drug lords is dead after a Mexican military operation. We have more on the death of powerful cartel leader El Mencho. Over 8,000 flights canceled for Sunday and Monday as a blizzard slams northeastern. We have up-to-date details. The TSA says its PreCheck program is still operational. That's despite earlier plans by the Department of Homeland Security to suspend the program due to the ongoing DHS shutdown. President Trump saying on Truth Social that he plans to raise global tariffs from 10% to 15%. This comes after the Supreme Court ruled to strike down the use of the tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The U.S. men's hockey team wins gold after defeating Canada at the 2026 Winter Olympics. The feat ends a decades-long Olympic drought for the U.S. men's team.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Don Ma. A 21-year-old man was shot and killed by law enforcement inside the security perimeter of President Donald Trump's Mar-a-lago estate. Authorities found a shotgun and gas canister near the suspect.
Law enforcement says the suspect was found inside the property's front gate at around 1:30 a.m. Sunday morning. A deputy from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office and two Secret Service agents confronted him.
He was ordered to drop those two pieces of equipment that he had with him, at which time he put down the gas can, raised the shotgun to a shooting position. At that point in time, the deputy and the two Secret Service agents fired their weapons and neutralized the threat. He is deceased at the scene.
Aside from the suspect, there were no other fatalities or injuries. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump were in Washington, D.C. at the time of the incident after attending a governor's dinner Saturday evening. The sheriff said the FBI is leading the investigation into the incident.
One thing I would ask the public is if you live in the area of the shooting, please check your exterior cameras for last night, early this morning. If you see anything that looks suspicious or out of place, please contact us.
The young man has been identified as Austin Tucker Martin from Cameron, North Carolina. His mother reported him missing Saturday night. The president and first lady were not on the property by Sunday morning, but others were. According to foreign affairs expert Bart Marcois, something doesn't seem right.
All we know about him is that he was a white male. At this point, we don't know motivation, background, any of that. And the real question is, how did he get inside Mar-a-Lago? I have been here for the past week. I'm still down here. I have friends who are still inside. The security there is impressive and comprehensive. How did this guy get inside the compound that is guarded by local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and the Secret Service?
Officials are also investigating where the firearm carried by the suspect was purchased. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt praised the Secret Service for acting quickly while most Americans were sleeping.
FBI Director Kash Patel posting on X saying the FBI is dedicating all necessary resources in the investigation of this morning's incident at President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, adding that his agency will work closely with the Secret Service plus state and federal partners. Meanwhile, the leader of the powerful Jalisco New Generation cartel known as El Mencho was killed today. He is among the world's most wanted drug traffickers. The Mexican drug lord was killed during an operation led by Mexico's military in the central western state of Jalisco. El Mencho was wanted by U.S. authorities who offered millions for information on his whereabouts. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, the drug lord was a former police officer. He led one of the most powerful and ruthless criminal organizations in Mexico. The Mexican Defense Ministry said he was seriously wounded in the military action. He died while being airlifted to Mexico City. The ministry said several armored vehicles and weapons, including rockets, were seized. The U.S. State Department issued a shelter-in-place warning for U.S. citizens in major Mexican cities today. Mexico said the U.S. provided intelligence that helped the operation. President Donald Trump says he is sending a hospital ship to Greenland to provide medical assistance. The offer, however, is declined by Nuuk. Trump saying in a Truth Social post yesterday he is working with Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry, the special envoy to Greenland, to send a hospital boat to the Arctic island. The president says the ship is on the way to, quote, take care of the many people who are sick and not being taken care of there. Trump accompanied his post with an illustration of the USNS Mercy, a Navy hospital ship. In response, Greenland's prime minister saying today it's going to be a no thank you from us. He says the idea has been noted, adding that Greenland has a public healthcare system which is free for citizens. Late last month, Greenland, Denmark, and the U.S. launched diplomatic talks. Trump has insisted that the U.S. needs to acquire Greenland for the purpose of national security before Russian or Chinese interests are entrenched in the area. Next, get out your snow shovel and warm up that snowblower. A powerful winter storm expected to slam the Northeast. NTD Sean Marshall brings us the latest.
Just as the snow finally begins to melt in New York City, another big storm is headed across the Northeast. States and major cities are declaring snow emergencies for a potentially historic storm. The high-impact nor'easter has begun moving into parts of the Northeast with blizzard conditions, heavy snow, and strong winds. Millions of people throughout metros from Philadelphia to Boston are being warned of treacherous blizzard conditions, with those warnings extending from Delaware and eastern Maryland on through New Jersey, New York City, and some parts of New England.
In total, this storm is projected to drop between 18 and 24 inches across New York City, coming up to 28 inches in certain areas. New Yorkers should also expect dangerous winds. These are blizzard conditions. New York City has not faced a storm of this scale in the last decade.
Snow will also fall further down south in mid-Atlantic, including in Baltimore with lesser amounts of Washington, D.C. Over 8,000 flights have already been canceled for Sunday and Monday combined. Some major airlines have issued travel advisories and are making it easier for affected customers to change their itineraries.
When you look at the scale of the storm that's descending in our state, and actually in some parts starting already, this will be something the likes of which we've not seen in years. We can do this. You know, New Yorkers, yeah, we're tough, we're resilient, we're hardcore, but don't think that you are stronger than Mother Nature. Okay? Do not try to outsmart Mother Nature.
New York City's mayor has been spotted assisting with salting operations of this historic blizzard. On Saturday, the mayor offered paid roles for shoveling snow in New York City, but you will need 2 forms of ID and a social security card. Storms are expected to be ending by Monday evening, but parts of New England should still be seeing some of the storm's lasting impacts. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Thrills for American hockey fans as Team USA clinches Olympic gold. The U.S. men's team defeating Canada 2-1 in overtime at the Winter Games in Milan. The victory ends a 46-year gold medal drought for the U.S.
American fans leave the Olympic venue with huge smiles and national pride.
Elation.
Yeah, joy.
Joy. But I tell you, it was just a great game to watch. I mean, because you know you're watching history, right? And years from now, people will talk about this game. And we can say we were there.
Yep,
so,
absolutely.
Because Canada played so well through most of the game. And, you know, things happen and you get lucky too. But it was a great game all in all.
And get a little teary-eyed. It's an emotional moment.
President Donald Trump posted a congratulatory message to the U.S. team on Truth Social. Canadian fans are understandably disappointed, yet still hopeful.
Your heart just sinks a little bit. Like you said, it was pretty fast. So you have 20 minutes of game, but you know it's sudden death, and then we just suddenly died in that moment.
Disappointed. I think probably most Canada fans are. A lot of us probably feel like we should have won that game. Yeah, Canada played really hard. Ultimately, do I think that it's still our sport? The answer is yes.
The last time the two national teams met was for the Four Nations face-off last year. Canada beat the U.S. for the trophy. Then Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweeted, "You can't take our country and you can't take our game." The first part, a reference to President Trump's wish to make Canada a part of the U.S. In response, the White House tweeted a picture of an American bald eagle pushing a Canada goose into ice.
Okay, staying with the historic U.S. men's Olympic hockey win, we're joined by AJ Bruno, sports analyst and hockey fan. AJ is in New Jersey now under the snowstorm. So AJ, before we get to the main topic here, I understand you're feeling the impact of the snowstorm. Maybe you can just tell us what the situation is right now.
Yeah, Don, I got very unlucky to start here. One of the first power outages. Hopefully it's not for too long, but the road isn't too bad yet. It's supposed to be much worse later. The wind's supposed to be 55 miles an hour. So it's not, horrific yet, but somehow a transformer blew. And so I'm joining you from the dark ages, but glad to be here either way.
Yeah, really appreciate it under those circumstances. But I thought the winter snow was over. It was starting to melt in the past couple of days, and now we get this storm. I hope the snow doesn't accumulate. I'm just hoping for that. But thank you for joining us. Now, on to the hockey game. How do you feel about this win? This some are saying historic defeat of Canada by the United States.
I mean, it's a huge game. This American team was talked about being extremely good. They were a slight underdog, but it was going to be a close game no matter what. And I think for anyone who saw it today, this was an intense, hardly fought game. But there was great goalkeeping, and then, of course, the clutch win in overtime. So this team was just as good, really, it was better than the Canadian team, right? Because we won the gold at the end of the day. This is obviously huge. There hasn't been an American gold medal in hockey since 1980. It's been a very long time coming. And to beat the team, which is, the preeminent favorite, like someone said in your piece there, it's their sport. Well, I guess so, but now I guess it's our sport. But it's great to see the U.S. team win. I think it's a huge moment, not just for sports and hockey fans, but it's a moment of pride for the U.S. And to see that close out the Winter Games, I think was really wonderful.
Okay, so you're saying now it's the U.S. sport. Do you think this is perhaps a turning point then for the United States in terms of future gold medal wins?
I mean, the Canadians are always going to be good at hockey because it's frozen there, right? Everyone skates before they can walk. But I think that the sport here is, it's not as popular as other sports, right? But it's big. There's been a lot of elite development, especially with some of these younger players. So you saw this team really play better than they have in several Olympics since we almost won in 2010, right? So, that's what I hear. I mean, there's really an elite group of American players. They outplayed the Canadians. They beat the Canadians. So going forward, I don't see why not. So I'm very optimistic that we can see that continued success in the future, and we won't see nearly 2 generations pass before the U.S. Wins the gold in hockey. So it was great. I think they should savor that victory, but if we could do it again 4 years and beyond, that would be wonderful. And I'm optimistic that it could be the beginning of hopefully more success to come in much smaller intervals of time.
So what do you think is the biggest contributing factor to the U.S. beating Canada in this game? Some are praising the goalie for the U.S. side. Which player had the best performance as well?
Yeah, I mean, for everyone who watched it, it was the goalkeeping. I mean, it was an aggressive game, very aggressive game by both teams, especially Canada. They had the momentum for a lot, and it was the goalkeeping that kept the U.S. in the game because he was pressured that entire time. And gave the team the opportunity to win it in overtime. So if it wasn't for the phenomenal goalkeeping, I think we would have lost this game. So yeah, I mean everyone did their part, right? But at the end of the day, it's a hugely important position in hockey because if you're letting these pucks get through an extra goal or two, that makes all the difference. And in this game, it did. And so we saw. I think most people agree he was the MVP, hands down.
All right, what do you say about Team Canada's performance here?
I mean, look, I'm not going to bash them. If they want to compete as Americans next time, they'll run as our state. Feel free. But look, it's always been their sport historically. They played a very intense game. It was a very defensive game. But you could see both teams really wanted it. Like this was, I've seen NHL games. It was nowhere near this intense. I mean, this was played like a gold medal game. It was exciting. It was. For anyone who watched it, I don't think they were disappointed. So, yeah, Canada, I think, left it all on the ice too. But at the end of the day, the U.S. got it done. And it was 2-1 right in overtime. So it was hanging by a knife's edge. Team USA was able to win it. Not to take anything from Canada, great players. They were obviously very disappointed by the silvers. You could see it on their face. Not too many happy faces. But yeah, they played great, but our guys played better today. And at the end of the day, that's what counted. Obviously, their captain was out too. I'm not sure how much of a difference that made, but we got it done. And yeah, like I said, both teams played fantastic, but U.S. just a little better today.
So maybe you can just take an educated guess here. What is your feeling on how Canadians are feeling about this? Because as you mentioned numerous times, that this is their sport, right? And they've, as long as I can remember, I mean, I haven't been following this for a very long time, but Canada has always beaten the U.S. In these Olympic hockey matches. But this is a historic loss for Canada.
Yeah, it's big, right? I mean, we last won against the Soviet Union in 1980. That's how long ago it was. Like I mentioned, 2010 in Vancouver, also the U.S. and Canada in the finals. We lost that one, I think, 3-2. So for Team USA to beat Canada at their sport, because it's a cold weather sport, right? If you're from a warmer place, you probably don't grow up playing that game. So in Canada, everyone plays it. That's why they're so good at it. So yeah, this is extremely historic. I think in terms of winter sports, it's one of the most notable events in Winter Olympics history in particular. So that's why you see so much celebrating. You see the president tweeting about it. Really, anyone who cares at all about this, I think, is excited about that. And in Olympics where we saw some bad press in terms of some people not being so patriotic, I think this is something that the country can come together from. It's historic, it's big, and I think we deserve to be happy about it. With all the bad things going on, this is something we can be excited about and joyful about. I think it's pretty amazing.
Okay, just one last thing. I'm wondering to myself here, against the backdrop of all the politics, the tensions between the U.S. and Canada, between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Mark Carney, I'm wondering if Canada feels the sting a little bit more against this backdrop of this tension.
Well, the goose did not look happy with the eagle in that photo, so I think that kind of speaks to that. Yeah, you could say a little bit that's playing out, right? Because there's been a little bit of bad blood or tension. I mean, Canada's our neighbor. It's always been historically an ally. I think there's been some tension recently, and obviously even before Carney, Trudeau, not somebody that a lot of people had a high opinion of. So, but there's definitely been that tense feeling. But I mean, that's our closest neighbor. So I think there should be a friendship, whether the arrangement, whether it's business or whatever has changed. Yeah, but this is sports, and I think we should be able to put that aside. Politics shouldn't come into play. Does it? I guess probably to some extent. But I mean, look, it's something people should be able to enjoy. I think it transcends all that. That's what I think people get joy out of when they're watching sports. You hear about the nonsense going on in the news, whatever your position is. I think that's something we can come together on. And I think that's one of the things that's really, really great about sports. So I hope it doesn't intrude too much, but I'm sure that might be a little bit for Canada. We'll see how much that goes, but I think they'll kind of take it in stride ultimately, and it's just a game, right?
Right. At the end of the day, it's just a game. Even though it's the Olympics, it's just a game here. But AJ, thank you for speaking with us, and once again, hope you stay safe out there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
The Transportation Security Administration says its PreCheck program is not shutting down. This reverses an earlier decision that signaled a temporary suspension. The TSA saying in a post on X today, quote, "At this time, TSA PreCheck remains operational with no change for the traveling public." The agency added it will evaluate operations on a case-by-case basis as the Department of Homeland Security shutdown continues. It also saying, courtesy escorts, such as those members for Congress, have been suspended. Officers will instead focus on securing America's skies. DHS said earlier that TSA PreCheck will be paused at 6 a.m. Eastern today. The program also vetted passengers to skip regular security lines and move quickly through airport security. More than 20 million people are actively enrolled in the service. The CBP Global Entry Program, which serves a similar purpose, was also suspended. TSA did not provide an update on its status. The DHS shutdown began on February 14th. Secretary Kristi Noem said yesterday the agency was making tough but necessary workforce resource decisions. She suggested that FEMA will be hampered by the shutdown, saying this is particularly important given the upcoming storm. California Republicans are making early moves as the 2026 governor's race heats up. Christina Corona takes us inside an annual convention in Anaheim, where several GOP candidates made their case to voters. And the world's largest winemaker planning to close a facility in California's wine country. It says demand is shifting as a survey shows Gen Z is drinking less than other generations. David Lam reports. Stay tuned for more after this break. President Trump saying on Truth Social that he plans to raise the global tariffs from 10% to 15%. This comes after the Supreme Court ruled to strike down the use of tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Joining us now to discuss is Christian Briggs, economist and CEO of Hard Asset Management. So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. And as you know, the president called the ruling ridiculous. He said during that press briefing, he said he can destroy trade, basically, but he can't charge a little fee. Can you just talk to us about this? What are you thinking about this ruling?
Well, first, thanks for having me, and it's a great topic. So the constitutionality of what President Trump was trying to use in this terms of imposing the tariffs was something a little more outside the conventional box, let's say that. But it wasn't without good reason. So what President Trump did was he utilized the value of I call it the emergency context. It's the context of that it's kind of a catastrophic event. You know, people are talking about the debt and the deficit and trying to be able to make fair trade a lot more palatable for the trading partners that we have and for the United States. In other words, he wanted a level playing field. The bottom line is he went through all of these hoops to be able to create a level playing field. The Supreme Court was probably not out of the box when I look at things like the ACA back in the day, the Affordable Care Act. You know, people said, "Oh, you can't do that because of the interstate commerce law about taxation across the state lines." And Roberts said, "No, we could do it." And then the Supreme Court came back and looked at this and said, "You know what? We're not going to give it to the president because the constitutionality is going to come into more of a play here. In other words, it's going to be first and front row, the reasoning behind our decision." Even though I believe that many of the justices thought what President Trump was doing was the right thing for the country, but now he's going to kind of circumvent it again. I think Monday he's going to come out with a whole new plan.
Okay, so, I mean, at the end of the day, Christian, do you think this ruling is good for the economy, bad for the economy, somewhere in between? Is there going to be much change after this?
Well, it's going to be good for the country that we maintain constitutionality within the way the Supreme Court looks at every piece of legislation or an executive order, because an executive order is legislation until the Supreme Court either yays or nays it. So it is good for the country from a constitutional standpoint. It puts everybody back in check. Now, but the bad part is the tariffs do have some strong fundamental value in order to be able to maintain the consistency of trade negotiations. That's the key. As in the past, sometimes the Supreme Court will rule and give the president favor because the genie is already out of the box. And again, I bring up the ACA. That part of the reasoning why Roberts was the final decision maker on that was the genie was already out of the box regarding the amount of people that were on health care. So this ruling is good for constitutionality. It's good that President Trump now has some type of understanding, the borders, if you will, about where he can play within and kind of what the Supreme Court is telling him, you can't go past this. So come tomorrow, Monday, I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a new set of versions of how he thinks the tariffs can stay in place. And the economy needs these tariffs in a sense because it makes our domestic manufactured goods more appealing, less expensive, and it encourages international manufacturers to come to America to avoid the tariffs and bring that manufacturing back within the United States.
Okay, so on that note, maybe you can elaborate a bit more on the impact that these tariffs have had on the U.S. up to this point, to the ruling.
Okay, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that one because a lot of people kind of miss the value of the pros and cons on the tariff. So good question. Let's talk about that. The pros are that we have actually increased already the presence of domestic manufacturing from international trading partners. This is a fact. Whether it's automotive, whether it's making just small little widgets, whatever it is, that's already increased. Jobs are starting to come back to America, both from internal manufacturing as well as international manufacturing that's either expanding here or coming here altogether. So the good parts of the tariffs are as follows: increasing competitiveness within domestic manufacturing. Import prices are still high, so it makes domestic products more attractive. It encourages the economy to be able to look to manufacturing as the next wave of GDP growth. Now, the downside of tariffs, and there are some downsides, but it's not the kind of downside that people look for long term. The internal amount of tariffs that are being charged to the American people is about $150 billion right now that people have paid in additional costs for those goods. Now, those things range from different things, but knowing that that imported parts or imported items have about $150 billion now in additional costs that the American people did pay. The question is how does that $150 billion impact the economy or impact the bottom half of America? Because that is the amount of money that these people, because if you're making quite a bit of money, those tariffs don't have quite the disadvantage effect on incomes or people's discretionary income as it does the bottom half of America. However, I've said this before, whatever we may pay a little bit more in tariffs on the bottom half can be offset dramatically by wage increasing. And how do we get wage increasing? Manufactured jobs. So what Trump's saying is, look, a little pain right now on the tariffs for long-term gain, and the gain is going to be significant, I believe, in the second half of this year. But 27, we could have that 4 and 5% GDP consistently, because manufactured goods has the largest amount of impact in the economy, period.
So, Christian, I'm sure you're aware of this. On the day that this was announced, Friday morning, stock markets had a little bump up immediately following this news. Can you just talk to us as well about what investors are thinking?
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that. I did notice that as soon as the Supreme Court came out with its ruling and then gave the White House kind of the perimeters that it would need to be working within the context, the market took that as saying it wasn't a full-blown, you can't do tariffs, you just can't do tariffs in the way of which you're trying to do them. Now, I've said this before, when the market reacted like that, it was very positive, at least from a decent gain within the Dow and, of course, the NASDAQ, which means the investor community liked the way the Supreme Court came back to President Trump. Even though President Trump wasn't really pleased or happy with the way the ruling was, they did give him some latitude in some of the language that said, look, you can't do it this way. However, there might be some other ways in which you can do it, unless, of course, you go right to the legislative body, which is Congress, and get the permission and get them to say, yes, we're going to vote for these tariffs because, in a sense, it's taxation. But the investor community were really happy the Supreme Court said what it did, giving President Trump, again, some latitude and possibly a little pivoting opportunity on Monday, which I believe that's what President Trump plans on doing.
Okay, just one final thing, Christian. And I was talking about this issue a couple days ago with some of my guests, and the question came up whether this diminishes President Trump, whether it's domestically or on the global stage. Because President Trump has said he ended wars with these tariffs. He used these tariffs as a negotiation tactic. And you alluded to, I think, earlier that now with this ruling, President Trump will have to jump through a bit more hoops. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think this sort of diminishes him in terms of foreign policy, national security on the global stage? What do you think?
Okay, let's talk about that. Will President Trump, in the eyes of his beholders, okay, the world stage of international trade and, of course, international negotiations, diminish him? Not at all. Let me tell you why. See, one of the things that President Trump, the man, let's talk about Donald J. Trump, whenever he looked at real estate deals and there were challenges ahead of him, and some of the times I'm sure he tried to get his permits and work with all the unions to be able to get these big, beautiful buildings built, whether hotels or residential towers back in Manhattan. You see, a man like Donald Trump doesn't look at challenges as adversity roadblocks. What he does is he says, okay, that's just one way not to try to make that happen. It's like they always say, is how many times did Edison try to make the light bulb work? 1,000 times. None of those were defeats. They were just ways of which not to do it. So what I look at is President Trump, because of his success in real estate and his success in business overall, He doesn't look at this as a roadblock. What he says is, okay, that's just one way we can't get it done. So let's look at another way to get it done. So the international community is not going to look at President Trump in any diminished light whatsoever. That would be a complete falsehood. They're going to look at him and say he's even stronger, because a man that can overcome challenges becomes stronger when he finds the direction he needs to go in order to be successful. They always say, don't invest in a person that's never had challenges or some defeats, because then when that happens, he won't know what to do. So Trump looked at this and said, hey, you know what? What we're looking at here now is one way not to make the light bulb work. Let's look at the ways we can make it work. And so that's what they're going to do come Monday. And I'm sure the White House counsels and all of his legal team and constitutional lawyers were looking this over the weekend and even prior to that. I can tell you right now, there's no way that they didn't have A and B ready to go. A, if he got the ruling, and B, if he didn't get the ruling. And he didn't get what he wanted. So you know what? They've got a plan. It's no different than being delayed on building a building. He'll work through it. He'll get it done. It does not diminish him. In fact, I would tell you this, he's probably stronger now than any time in the second term.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point there, Christian. And in the press briefing, President Trump said as well that this ruling actually gives him more powers, gives the president more powers to impose tariffs. And I was following that press briefing as well, and he didn't portray himself in any light of weakness. Actually, to the contrary, he seemed even stronger. That's what stood out to me. But thank you for explaining to us today, Christian. Pleasure speaking with you.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
Next Tuesday, President Trump will give the first State of the Union address of his second term. What issues will the president talk about in his address, and how has America changed since his first term? Join NTD's Tiffany Myers, Steve Lance, and Mari Otsu on Monday, February 23rd at 6 p.m. Eastern for a preview of the major topics the president is expected to cover in the State of the Union. And on Tuesday, join us at 7 p.m. Eastern as we track the president ahead of his speech, hear reactions from lawmakers, and speak with panelists on what it all means for you. Don't miss it. California Republicans are making early moves as the 2026 governor's race heats up. Christina Corona takes us inside an annual convention in Anaheim where several GOP candidates made their voices heard. And the world's largest winemaker planning to close a facility in California's wine country. It says demand is shifting as a survey shows Gen Z is drinking less than other generations. David Lam reports. Stay tuned for more news after this break. California Republicans gathered in Anaheim as the race for governor begins to take shape. Party members met for their annual convention where candidates outlined their visions for the state ahead of the June primary. NTD's Christina Corona reports from Anaheim, California.
The California Republican Assembly held its 2026 annual convention at the Hilton Hotel in Anaheim. Members elected party officials and debated key resolutions ahead of the 2026 race. Several gubernatorial candidates, including former Fox host Steve Hilton and Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, also spoke at the event.
The convention comes as Republicans begin positioning themselves for the June primary. Candidates outline their priorities on issues ranging from homelessness to public safety. Among them, former Fox News contributor Steve Hilton addressed the crowd. He currently leads the race.
Common sense and sanity on homelessness. It's very simple. One, enforce the law. It is illegal to live and camp on the streets. It's always been illegal. If local leaders won't enforce the law, I will. I will use state law enforcement resources to get people off the streets. Number two, get them into mental health treatment. Number three, get them into addiction treatment.
Hilton also outlined plans to cut state spending and reverse policies he says have driven up costs.
We are going to end Gavin Newsom's outrageous $20 billion a year free healthcare for illegal immigrants. So we cut healthcare costs and wait times for Californians.
He also focused on boys and girls sports.
Common sense and sanity in California. What are you talking about, biological boys and girls sports? How have we put up with this for so long? How have we put up with it for so long? We save girls' sports in California and save our society from the outrageous obscenity of boys and girls' sports and locker rooms and spaces.
Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco centered his campaign on public safety.
For public safety, we will actually make crime a crime again in this state. every single prison that usually closed, there's 5, he's about to close 2 more, I will reopen on day 1.
Bianco also addressed water policy and agriculture.
If the government controls our food and our water, they control the people, and that's what we have right now. With me as your governor, we will build many dams and reservoirs to hold surface water. We will provide farmers with 100% of the water that they need for their agriculture.
Gubernatorial candidate, pastor, and author Che Yon of Pasadena says his campaign centers on faith.
Because the real issue is a sin problem, it's a rebellion problem against God. God is nowhere in the picture in Sacramento. And I want to bring God, and that's why I'm running on faith, family, and freedom. I'm bringing God back into Sacramento, back into the state of California.
Businessman and gubernatorial candidate Leo Zaki turned his attention to election integrity, criticizing the state's vote counting timeline.
Because it's about who counts the vote, right? That's why we need 36 days to tabulate the vote with unsolicited mail-in ballots, which is why we're going to put a stop to that. We're going to make sure that California voters get it done in 1 day. Get it counted that night with records to account for every single thing.
County officials will begin mailing ballots on May 4th for the June 2nd primary. Reporting from Anaheim, California, Christina Corona, NTD News.
The world's largest winemaker is planning to shut down a facility in California's wine country. The producer says it's rethinking its long-term strategy. A survey shows alcohol consumption declining among Generation Z. NTD's David Lam has more.
Is the wine industry winding down? Gallo, the largest wine producer in the world by volume, plans to close down one of its facilities in California. Almost 100 workers are being laid off at several wineries and tasting rooms in Napa County and Sonoma County, regions known for luxury wine tasting and tourism. The company made the announcement on February 12th, and the cuts will be effective by April 15th. Employees will receive support and opportunities within the company. The company says Gallo is aligning parts of our operations with our long-term business strategy to ensure we remain well-positioned for future success. As part of this process, we made the difficult decision to reduce certain wine country operations. These changes are driven by market dynamics, evolving consumer demand, and available capacity across our wineries. Gallo was founded in 1933 by 2 brothers and is the largest family-owned winery in the U.S., owning over 100 different wine labels. Gallo closed the winery last September, resulting in the loss of almost 50 jobs. Non-alcoholic wine and beverages have entered the market, displayed alongside vintage wines at major trade shows in Paris.
It's a growing market, and I would say it's not a trend. It's here to stay as people are more mindful of their body. People are more watching about the consequences of alcohol. If you drink today, you probably have headache tomorrow, and they don't want it because you need to function. You have kids, you have a job, so yeah, it's a performance society, so more and more mindfulness is becoming an issue, and it will stay.
From 1997 to 2023, at least 60% of Americans reported drinking alcohol, but that percentage has fallen to 54%, according to an August 2025 Gallup poll.
I don't really see people drinking wine like my age. It's either like tequila or like vodka. It definitely damages your liver early stage. Like if you become like an alcoholic, don't drink. Just be safe, I guess. Do whatever you want, but be safe. Don't drink and drive.
David Lam, NTD News, California.
And now I'm joined by Vital Signs host Brendan Fallon. Vital Signs offers natural and nutritional ways to optimize health, including preventing and treating cancer. And that's what we're talking about today. So Brandon, good to see you at a different time this time. So yeah, talk to us about this.
Well, there's different reasons to be concerned about cancer. We've seen the rate of this rise, particularly certain types of cancer like colorectal cancer in younger cohorts, and that is a matter of concern. So the question is what can be done to, in the case where someone has cancer, to treat it, and also the steps taken to prevent it earlier on.
So I understand you brought a couple of clips with you today. Would you like to introduce one of them?
Sure, and recently I spoke to someone a little different to the usual high-ranking doctors that I speak to. This guy is a master herbalist and a certified nutritionist. His name is Donnie Yance, and he's has decades of treating cancer, and he has people in stage 3 and stage 4 of cancer that he's worked with for decades. And he's using approaches, holistic methods, which include herbs, supplements, and a range of things. And he even talks about the value of love in cancer therapy, and using those also alongside conventional treatments. Okay. The first clip, he's talking about his approach, giving a wide, and talking about the importance of how we think about treatment, because traditionally the idea is all about nuking the tumor, killing the tumor, but in order to really gauge the effectiveness of treatment, he has a different way of evaluating that.
Okay, well, let's take a look.
Conventional medicine's very heroic. Wow, look at how that tumor just shrunk down to nothing. Humble medicine is, well, maybe we're not shrinking the tumor that much, but we're optimizing health. The patient's living better, living longer. And so, again, when you categorize plant medicines, we start with kind of the root system of health, and that is tonic herbs and adaptogens. And so those are plants that people have used, again, for longevity. We're at Longevity Fest. Non-specific matter and a normalized matter, and mostly doing only 2 things: helping us at the molecular, cellular, and organ system level to be more robust and to be more efficient. There's no better way to help a person be healthy than say, I'm going to make you stronger and I'm going to make your body be more efficient.
So I guess the question I have is, which plants or herbs are rather effective against cancer?
Yeah, and this is something I spoke to Donnie about, and I've spoken to other doctors about. What Donnie came back with was a list of things that sounded almost more like cooking ingredients, which was quite interesting. And this next clip, he runs through some of those particular things that he's using in his treatment, and that are showing increasing research value as well.
Okay.
Well, the strongest human evidence is probably looking at some of the research on some of what I call the medicinal mushrooms. So that's one area that's got overwhelming amount of research on it, particularly the mushroom, reishi mushroom, Ganoderma lucidum, and then what's called turkey corn, which is Trametes versicolor. There's hundreds of human studies validating that those enhance people's quality of life and lead to a longer life. And that everybody needs to analyze evidence based on those 2 endpoints only. Does what I'm doing going to help me live better, or does it help me live longer? Not does the tumor go away, not do you get any other biomarker is insignificant.
So did he mention other effective holistic treatments against cancer as well in that interview?
Yeah, he did, Don, and he mentioned some that I've heard mentioned a number of times by high-profile oncologists, holistic oncologists, people who are combining conventional medicine approaches like chemotherapy, radiotherapy, with nutrients and also herbal treatments. One of the things he talked about was elevating zinc level, because what happens in cancer very commonly is that copper will rise very high because the cancer cells are using that, and the zinc will drop low, and health is very dependent on this correct ratio of those 2 things, copper and zinc. So one approach is to elevate the zinc levels when someone has cancer. Another thing he spoke about, which I've heard mentioned before, is vitamin D, getting vitamin D levels up. And part of the reason for this is because that the immune system is very instrumental in a person's prevention and also how they're going to be able to deal with cancer. And vitamin D is an instrumental component of the immune system.
Okay, so is there another clip, or?
Yeah, we still have another clip there,
yeah.
Don.
Let's take a look at the next clip.
I work with plants that a lot of chemotherapeutic drugs are made from. You look at the Madagascar periwinkle plant. 3 chemo drugs come from that: vincristine, venirabine, and vinblastine. 3 drugs come from one plant. So why not give the whole plant, which has, I think, over 70 alkaloids? Taxol, big chemotherapeutic drug, that comes from the Pacific Yew plant, which is where I live, that has 27 taxines in it. All the taxines have anti-tumor effects, so why not combine the whole plant with all of the taxines with the drug?
So, Brandon, if people would like to know more about these methods, these herbs, where would they go to find more information about these approaches?
Sure, I mean, they can look up Donnie online, Donnie Yance. He has a website, donnieyance.com, I believe, and all that information is laid out there. He has a specific method he uses, a whole systems method, employing all these different things. They can also go to ntd.com, look up vital signs in the shows tab, and look for the full video.
Right, and I was just going to tell our viewers you can watch more on Brandon's show, Vital Signs, on NTD.com. He's got great stuff on that channel, so make sure you guys take a look. U.S. figure skater Alysa Liu going viral after ending a 24-year gold medal drought for the United States at the 2026 Winter Olympics. Liu hopes to share the spotlight with her father, Arthur Liu, who escaped communist China with nothing and established his American dream. NTD's Laura Hua brings us this story.
So my father was one of the student leaders in the Tiananmen Square protests, and obviously he had to escape China.
This is when Alysa Liu shared her father Arthur Liu's story during an interview with ABC 10 in October. We spoke to her father earlier this week to learn about his journey.
In the spring of 1989, I organized all the demonstrations in Guangzhou.
In the summer of 1989, Chinese college students launched unprecedented protests across China, hoping the communist regime there would reform and build a more fair, transparent, democratic political system. Arthur Liu, a graduate student at the time, organized the demonstrations in southern China's Guangzhou, where he was studying.
We really didn't want to overthrow the Chinese Communist government. I personally just wanted them to change.
The CCP ordered tanks and troops to suppress the unarmed protesters. Many people died. Liu escaped China and began a new life in the United States, but he didn't forget the Chinese people still living under the CCP's tyranny.
And he came to America. And he continued to organize protests here in front of the Chinese embassies and stuff like that.
Alysa is the oldest of Liu's 5 children. Her father says she cares about the human rights situation in China.
She understood why I protested against the Chinese government, why I had to flee from China, and how I came to America. I think she really appreciates my life story. That in some ways she's fascinated about my life story of coming from China with nothing and rebuild my life in America.
In 2020, the DOJ and FBI reported that Beijing sent spies targeting Liu and his family, including Alysa. But that didn't stop the family. Alysa Liu still went on to compete at the Beijing Winter Olympics with the intensified security protection from the U.S. State Department. That's the story of Alysa Liu's father, who dedicated enormous time and resources to her figure skating career since she was little, and also educated her on the human rights situation in the country he once called home. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Italy bid farewell to the Winter Olympics tonight. The ceremony is being held in an open-air Roman amphitheater in the heart of the northern Italian city made famous as the setting for William Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet. The games have been spread across a large area of northern Italy, and Olympic cauldrons have burned in Milan and Cortina di Ampezzo since the games opened on February 6th. This will be extinguished on Sunday but reignited for the Paralympics, which run from March 6th to 15th. For round-the-clock coverage, visit ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. That's all for tonight's news. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Don Ma. Good night.